I'm speaking with Luigi Linguito, who is founder and CEO of Before AI. Hey, Luigi, tell us the origin story of Before AI. How did you discover there was an issue and discover how to address it?
So first of all, thanks, Richard, for having me here. So a bit of the background is I've been in the industry for probably longer than I can remember, but I started to put my finger on the keyboard when I was 4 years old. But later in my experience, I worked at Dell and at some point in network security at the time. And the regular feedback that I was getting at the time was the customer being very, upset, let's put it this way, that to be always victim, right? So, this was the time of next generation firewall, deep packet inspection that were coming up, but, still a very slow set of solutions, pretty much into detection and response. And I remember one day a customer say, Luigi, you should really try and with your team get something more proactive, more one step ahead of the criminals. And have you seen this movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise in the cinema? And so I went to the cinema, and for the ones that don't remember, this is a movie about a set of mutants that can see the future of crime, and then a special department of police called PreCrime police that can stop the criminal before any victim is made. And it was kind of impressed, and I said, well, if there is an area where PreCrime one day will exist, is definitely in network security and cybersecurity, because we have so much access to data, we have visibility. And at the time, things that today are pretty much given, like behavioral analytics and predictive analytics, AI. I mean, we're talking more than 15 years ago. These were still kind of on the drawing board. But anyway, fast forward to about 5 years ago, I'm at a research to startup program, and discussing with this researcher, they show me some piece of codes that they were developing, some patents that they were just granted. And I basically think this is PreCrime. So it's up to us to bring it to market and start to change the cybersecurity space to be less about detection and response and more about prediction and preemption.
Yeah, I think this would be a good time for you to delve into exactly how you do that. How do you predict future events, especially malicious events and attacks, and then how do you prevent them?
The logic, I think, to start with an analogy for the less technical, and that we'll get more into the technical details, but as an analogy, you can think of as a weather forecast system. So in weather forecast, what happens is you have satellites that observe the Earth, you have sensors all over the globe collecting temperature and humidity and wind speed and so on and so forth. And all this data is then collated in prediction models that are then used to provide the weather forecast. We work in a very similar fashion. So we have an infrastructure that has the first component that is a collection environment. So we observe the internet on a daily basis. We collect hundreds of parameters for each IP address and domain name. Part of those are pretty public parameter, like DNS information, IP data, and so on. Others are our own private calculation. So related with our algorithm, we would measure if an infrastructure is shared or not. Is it running on a cloud or less? Is the infrastructure of potentially the criminal moving from one data center to another, right? Once we have collected all this data, the next step is the machine learning algorithm that convert those static data into what we call behavior. And behavior are really a sequence of changes in those static data that the system observe over time and then classify and group. And so today we have about 2 billion behaviors that are the results of the last 4 years of data collection and analysis. And then we train the system, right? As any AI, it can qualify, but it cannot understand if it's good or bad. So we need to provide kind of what we call a ground truth. So the basis for the machine to recognize a good behavior from a bad behavior. And so the end of this process is you end up with a universe of behavior split between the light side of the force and the dark side of the force, if you like. And then from that, we observe behavioral changes with the same data, and has a behavior of an infrastructure get close enough to a malicious behavior recognized by the system, then that trigger the signal, what we call the PreCrime score. And at that point, we share then with our customer the indicator. So long story short, the system is an observation tool to identify malicious infrastructures as they get built from their behaviors. So we have 4 patents for that. And then once we have identified them, then we signal it to our customer through the API for the threat intelligence or through alerts for our brand protection. And the advantage of this approach, aside all the technology that is inside, is the ability to signal a future malicious infrastructure hours to days to weeks in advance of the attack being carried, because we see that behavioral imprint, if you want, already before that the infrastructure is ready for the attack. So our mean, just to give a number, our mean what we call the precog time, so the precognition time, so the ability to know before today is around 28 days. So 28 days before an attack starts or before another threat intelligence based on detection will identify those indicators. We have already signaled that to customer.
So that's a lot of behaviors, and I imagine a lot of data. Do your customers get that fire hose of data and then they have to decide what to do with it? Or are you essentially training it on the customer's environment and needs?
Correct. So the system is a software as a service type system. So we run the entire infrastructure. The data we collect are collected once for the calculation, and they are all outside of the customer networks. So we don't need any particular sensor or woke up in private data of the customer. And then what we provide to the customer are 2 services. The first one is a predictive intelligence. It's basically an API to which customer can connect their threat intelligence platform, CM SOAR, firewall, DNS resolver, and so on and so forth. And they receive the output of the calculation, so just the prediction. And in that output, there is indeed a PreCrime score that provide the customer the ability to decide how aggressive they want to be with the prediction. Do they want to take only the one where we are nearly sure about it? Our false positive rate is about 0.05%, so 10,000 prediction, 5 wrong. In this case, they will take the higher range of the PreCrime score. Do they want to be more prudent, and so they want to also the suspicious, in which case the false positive rate is higher, between 4 and 6%. Do they want the benign? Because we can predict the benign as well. This is very useful in industrial setting to do white listing instead of block listing. So it's up to the customer. The one thing that we do not provide is categorization, right? The prediction are so early in the life cycle of the criminal infrastructure that we don't know yet if that's going to be a command and control server for a ransomware or a phishing attack, and that's a credential stealing website, and so on and so forth. So we say we provide a good or bad indicator with a likelihood of good and bad, but not the actual category of goodness or badness, if you see what I mean.